To say I had no idea what I was getting myself into with this is an understatement, but surprisingly, it actually turned out pretty good in the end, despite a few challenges along the way. The point is that I'm doing something special for myself. Why? Because it's my birthday. My golden birthday, or champagne birthday, or whatever you want to call it. And if you don't know what that is, it's a once-in-a-lifetime event that only happens when you turn the age of the day you were born on, which in my case is March 29th. And because this is such a special birthday, I decided that I need to do something special, and that is cake. Vanilla cake, to be specific, made at home from scratch. I mean, I went full Nara Smith on this, and I kind of can't believe I actually went through with it, but this is how it went. It started out amazing. I'm feeling optimistic, in such a good mood, like, ooh, this is so cute and fun. I can't wait to do this. So first and foremost, gathering all the ingredients and materials. This is the moment that I realized I really need to buy new mixer attachments, but we're just gonna ignore that for now. And I kept feeling like I needed to go back to the recipe because there were so many steps, like it's actually insane. And keep in mind, I could still just go out and pick up a ready-made cake from the store and call it a day, but at this point I am committed. So anyway, back to the recipe. Step number 1 is flour. So I'm putting 2 cups into this bowl along with 2.5 teaspoons of baking powder, which felt like a ton. Next, we're just giving that a quick whisk to combine, and beautiful. That's it for step 1. Oven is officially preheated. And now we're moving on to the next step, which is to beat the eggs. And you'll see me take the eggs out of this random bowl, like off to the side. And that's because the recipe says it's best to let them come down in temperature. So I had been letting these sit in like lukewarm water for a few minutes, and then I'm drying them off before cracking them into the bowl to avoid getting water into the mix. I'm just doing what the recipe tells me to do. But now we're getting to the fun part, sorta. It's time to beat the eggs. And not just a quick little beat like you might expect. This was actually quite a process. And I thought warming the eggs before beating was enough, but no. The recipe says to beat the eggs for 30 seconds first and then slowly add in the sugar. And you can't just add in the sugar, you gotta add it in slowly over a period of 45 seconds. Very specific. Once the sugar is all added in, then we need to continue beating the mixture for, what do you think? Until combined, until slightly frothy. Nope, for 7 minutes. 7 minutes. So now I'm picking up my phone to check the time while holding this hand mixer and beating this sugar and egg mixture for exactly 7 minutes. Now, as you can see, that was only about 4 minutes of mixing, but while I'm mixing, I also have my eyes glued to this recipe that says, oh, by the way, while the egg is beating, you need to put the butter and the milk in the microwave for 2 minutes so that it's ready to be used as soon as the egg mixture is finished. So here we go now to the microwave to heat this butter and milk, and then continue beating for about 3 more minutes. At this point, I'm wondering if I even have what it takes to finish this, but I'm in way too deep to stop now. So we made it through the last 3 minutes of mixing. Butter and milk are warmed. Just giving that a quick little stir to combine. And then this is where it gets complicated for real, because now I have 2 things going at once. Stress levels are high, but this cake must be made. Next step is to add the flour and baking powder mixture that we set aside earlier. You can tell I'm getting stressed now because I start really making a mess from this point forward. But anyway, adding a little bit of flour at a time before mixing it for a couple of seconds, and then basically repeating that a few times until all the flour and baking powder is mixed in. Then we add the butter and milk mixture to the now empty flour bowl. Add a dash of vanilla, a little bit of oil, and then a quick mix. And then we're adding in a couple spoons of the batter, which is kind of an interesting step, but I guess it just makes it smoother and like easier for it all to combine. And of course, we're getting batter everywhere. And then from there, we add the liquidy batter to the full batter slowly, which, as you can see, almost turned into an absolute disaster when I almost missed the bowl. But luckily we kept it together and eventually got all this batter mixed together. This was a stressful experience. I literally had to shake it off, but also very relieving because now suddenly we're blowing through this recipe. At this point, I'm just giving it one final mix with a spatula, and I couldn't resist the urge to smell the batter because it was smelling so good. Really starting to get excited at this point. And speaking of getting excited, it's time to put the cake batter into the pans. The moment we've all been waiting for. We survived that complex recipe. Now it's time to get to business with these cake pans. I'm clearly unprepared for this because I'm using 2 completely differently shaped pans. I mean, you quite literally can't get 2 more differently shaped pans than 1 square and 1 circle. But this is what I'm working with, okay? And the parchment paper really wasn't doing me any favors either, but we're making it work. Now, this is the part where you're supposed to knock the pans on the counter 3 times to knock out any big bubbles in the batter. Slightly obnoxious, but needs to be done. And now we can finally put these cakes in the oven and let them cook The recipe says to bake for 30 minutes, so the countdown is on. So excited. I feel completely exhausted and accomplished at the same time, and I also have a giant mess to clean up. Love that for me. Let's get to that. I really tried not to check on the cakes too many times while they were baking, but I couldn't help myself. I wish you could smell how good my house smelled while this cake was baking. Oh, it smelled like the most delicious fresh vanilla. There's just something about that smell. Even if the cakes didn't turn out, this smell might have been satisfying enough for me to feel like it was all worth it. Okay, timer's going off, so it's time to see if these cakes are done. I have to say, I'm quite proud of how these turned out. I know they're far from perfect. They're two completely different shapes, and I haven't even thought about how I'm going to put them together yet. But for my first time making a cake like this from scratch, I'm impressed. And the toothpick comes out clean, which means we are good. And now we have to let them sit and cool for 15 minutes. Now, luckily, the fun is not over yet because we still need to decorate these bad boys. I can't remember if this step is in the recipe, but I'm taking them out of the pans and letting them cool on a wire rack for a little bit, and then just taking one more moment to admire these perfectly imperfect cakes. Also, they are so soft. It's so satisfying to see the bounce back. Okay, let's make some frosting. For the frosting, we need 225 grams of softened butter. So I had to bring out the scale for this, and 225 grams of butter is a lot more than I would have thought, but it is buttercream frosting after all. So this is like half the recipe. So once I have all 225 grams of butter, I'm going to quickly toss that in the microwave to soften. And then this is where things got a little bit interesting because first of all, I couldn't find a bowl big enough and light enough to fit all the sugar and also not be too heavy for the scale, but I settled on this one, and now it's time to add the icing sugar. The thing with this is that I started adding it through a sieve, but it's far too big for the bowl I'm using, so when I actually tried to sift it into the bowl, the sugar was going all over the sides and onto the counter, so I gave up on the sieve. I mean, who really cares? Also, this is my cake, so my rules. Eventually, we got all the sugar into the bowl, just barely. All 500 grams of it, by the way, nearly a full bag of icing sugar. And here I go again with my sad hand mixer. I feel so behind in the times with this thing. I feel like everyone has a stand mixer nowadays, which would have made this whole process so much easier, but it's fine. We've got to work with what you got. So now we're first beating the butter for about 3 minutes until it turns kind of white and fluffy. And the amount of projectiles I fell victim to during this whole process is kind of ridiculous, but I accept it wholeheartedly. It's all part of the process, and I'm just hoping this is all going to be worth it in the end. So anyway, now it's time to add in the sugar little by little and just mixing it in for a few seconds before adding more, and repeating that until all the sugar is mixed in. And of course, this got messy. Are we surprised? I mean, look at the projectiles. My poor computer, what a mess. But we are making progress with this buttercream frosting. Eventually, it ended up like this. Soft, creamy, fluffy, absolute disaster, questioning my entire existence. Everything is going exactly to plan. Sorta. Now, once I worked up a second wind of energy, I remembered that this might actually be the most fun part out of all of this. It's time to frost this cake. But before we do, I'm putting down some wax paper just in case this whole thing gets messy, or I decide I want to take it off this board, you know, just in case. And this is the part when I have to decide which side I want to frost and which side I want to be hidden. This was a lot harder than I thought it would be. I'm way too indecisive, but eventually we ended up with this. No, this. Wait. This. And at this point, I'm completely in the zone. I mean, you can see the pure focus in my eyes. I am ready. Okay. So the first thing we need to do is round the edges, because again, one of these cakes is a square and the goal is to make a round cake. Now, this is where I got the genius idea that I literally thought of in the moment, to take the pieces that I cut off and grab some frosting to basically use as glue to make little fillers for the parts that were lacking. How smart is that? No, really, how smart is that? I literally might be a genius for this. But also, if I would have just gotten a second round pan, that would have made this so much easier. So not sure how much of a genius I can really call myself. But anyway, I mean, look at me getting artsy with this. The confidence may have been a little too high, because then this happened. I dropped a piece. That one was for the streets. So now at this point, I'm kind of back to wondering why I thought I had what it takes to be a literal baker with zero experience. I mean, crazy. Then I realized that I actually need to put a layer of frosting between the two cakes. So now, I mean, my confidence is gone. I'm messing up left, right, and center, but luckily I was able to take the top cake off fairly easily. So I started adding a layer of frosting, and now we're back to having fun. Now we can put the top layer of cake back on and frost the rest of this thing. Quick pose for a thumbnail though, and then trying the frosting and realizing how good it tastes. Oh my goodness. Now I have to try not to eat half of this frosting by hand. So time to finish frosting this cake. And this is why this whole thing was a bit of a roller coaster, because this part was going pretty well, and then I started to feel confident again, and then I got to this part where I broke out the scraper, and then I really felt like an amateur. I mean, I developed a whole new level of respect for bakers after this, because I could never do this as a job. It's so much harder than it looks. It's a good thing no one is paying me for this cake, seriously. But the important thing to remember is just that I'm not a baker, and no one is paying me for this cake. This cake is for me, and despite being a complete amateur noob at this, I'm really proud of how it turned out, and I'm proud of myself for sticking it through and making it this far, because I really didn't have to do any of this. There are plenty of other cakes that would have looked 1,000 times better than this one, but that's not the point. The point is, this is a special occasion, and if you want to spend 6 hours making your own birthday cake, you can, and you should, and you'll probably have fun doing it. And guess what, you guys? The fun doesn't stop there. Check this out. Pink frosting. This is a big moment. I didn't get to film this part, but I actually added strawberry jam to a portion of the frosting to give it this subtle pink color. I didn't have any food coloring, but I saw that technique online, and surprisingly it worked really well. Despite me getting nervous about this part, because I've literally never decorated a cake like this in my life, this is where it really started coming together.
Cake reveal.
Dang!
Don't look too close.
Look, yeah, I can't see.
Look at that. What does it look like to you? Because to me, it looks like a perfectly imperfect cake that was made with love, and honestly, I couldn't be more proud. Also, Nara Smith, if you're watching, if you ever need an assistant chef, I mean, I could probably be your girl. Now, before we call it a day, this cake deserves just a little extra pizzazz. So I'm gonna add this cute little happy birthday decoration, and I even have some faux flowers to add to the whole look and make it look extra pretty. And now she's complete.
It seems cringy. I don't know what to do.
Oh, and I also added candles too. I had to. 29 of them to be exact.
Set the fire alarm.
Oh, that's a lot of candles. There's dense. Come on, man. Ooh.
Goodness.